The numbers are in. Yesterday, we ranked every single player relevant to fantasy football. Today, we're going to go game by game to dig in on the matchups. Let's find some strengths. Let's find some weaknesses. Let's check it out. On this screen, this is not a product that I made. This is Fantasy Labs matchup tool. I'm using my own data, of course, that I pull from Sports Info Solutions. What we're going to do today is go game by game for every single week 2 game. Try to find what teams did right in week 1. Try to find what the opponents did wrong in week 1 and pair that together here to find some strategic advantages for each of the games here. Of course, shout out to the chat as always. Lucky7 wanted me to go very early on. Brandon's here. Let's do this one, guys. And hopefully this will not be as long as the marathon yesterday was, where you guys got to watch me go literally player by player, moving them around an alignment chart. Today, we're just going to go through, look at this. Hopefully this is a good visual tool. And of course, shout out to our new sponsor, Probably. Of course, go check out Probly at probably.com. Crazy, I was able to book them as a sponsor. Go check it out. It is free right now. Of course, best way to get in good bets, best way to help yourself lose less money is at probably.com. So go check that out at probably.com right now. All right, let's see what we're doing here. So Minnesota, I have 21 implied points for Minnesota, 28 implied points for Philadelphia in this game. What stands out defensively from Philadelphia is a team that last year did a very good job shutting down the pass. This year, it does look like more of the same. Negative 0.3 EPA per pass allowed by Philadelphia. So despite that gangbusters game by Mac Jones in that one, where he did throw for 54 times, the results there, mostly one that I'm seeing out of volume instead of going against an actual weakness. Does feel like, though, again, with the success we saw from Hunter Henry, that tight end is going to be the weak spot we see for Philadelphia. Tight end EPA allowed is 0.5 per play. Every other spot on the field, it looks like, is a negative. The slot EPA, 0.04 EPA per slot target. So they are weak in the middle of the field, it looks like, for Philly so far to start the year. Nothing else standing out as a glaring weakness. One thing that could be against play action, there were only 6 play action plays that Philadelphia saw in week 1, but they get to give up a 0.5 EPA per target on that. That'd be towards the bottom of the league. Also not very good at stuffing the run. Last year, Philadelphia's weakness, the way that you would beat the Eagles defense was to run the ball. So with the usage for Alexander Madison, that could be interesting. Madison, also worth pointing out, a stat that I didn't see yesterday. We were going through his review, actually ran 2 routes out wide, or actually got 2 targets out wide as a receiver, and actually did pretty well with them. 0.35 EPA per target. Obviously, if he were actually a good receiver, they would use him as a receiver, but it is something to note there that Madison has a little bit more flexibility to move around. That could be a way they attack, but it does feel like TJ Hawkinson having the outlier day for Minnesota seems most likely. Of course, the slot weakness as well, going to benefit Justin Jefferson, as it did in week 1, going against Tampa Bay, another team that is very bad at defending the slot. But I do think that this spot, to me, screams Hawkinson right now. Jefferson also should benefit. But overall, these guys are going to have to come out to play because we know Minnesota's defense is not going to stop the Eagles. So I think there's going to be some production going on the Minnesota side. I'm not GM. Yes, I'm not even done with yesterday's stream. How did I do in weekly winners? I didn't play weekly winners. Didn't play any weekly winners or eliminator. I did all my entries in BBM because I thought that was the most plus EV for me, and hopefully that'll continue to be the case with the advance rate so far. Let's pull up Philadelphia's offense on here. And again, this is a Fantasy Labs matchup tool. This is not my own. So just want to say that out loud. If you want to look at these numbers for yourself, these are different numbers than I look at, but hopefully they provide some value to you guys and at least give us a visual element here that I think is important to kind of just talk through, ramble through numbers. 28 implied points for Philadelphia in this game. Overall, Minnesota's defense was not good at defending the pass per drop back, 0.04 EPA per drop back. So that basically means whether it be through the air, whether it be through a QB run, they are allowing value to be given up. They did defend QB rushes pretty well in week 1. Obviously, that is not the same matchup they're going to be going against here with Jalen Hurts, one of the best running QBs in the league, rather, basically a running back in QB form. But they did give up negative 0.2 EPA per rush to QBs. QB rushing EPAs tend to be a little bit higher. So to see a negative number for Minnesota does mean that at least for week 1, they did a pretty good job shutting down their opponents there. Overall, Minnesota's defense not too bad against the run. Negative 0.3 EPA against all run plays. Weak spot for them does seem to be defending out wide. We did see some success for Mike Evans that game against Minnesota. Guy who would benefit the most running out wide would theoretically be A.J. Brown, though Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown were equally targeted in week 1, both out of the wide spot as well as out of the slot. So it could be something that either guy could benefit here. Kind of makes me think that if you're going to go Hurts at captain, maybe you do go Brown and Devontae as part of that stack. Both guys, though, certainly going to be live as captain tomorrow. Of course, we will do the showdown full video tomorrow. Lineups 3 ways where I hand build one. I use the optimizer for one. I use the simulator for one. But today, though, just kind of looking at the general numbers overall. No other obvious weaknesses here. The Minnesota defense so far okay at defending play action, faced it 9 times, had a negative -0.06 EPA on those plays. Jalen Hurts did run play action 8 times in their first game as well. Was a positive EPA player there with 0.2 EPA per play action play. So not a huge strength, not a huge weakness. Could be one that kind of comes out in the wash. Jalen Hurts overall, as we talked about yesterday, just did not look like the great player that we're used to. New England's defense is so good, I think you can kind of give him some grace in that one. In this spot, though, it does feel like this is one where Minnesota's defense kind of breaks, maybe more bending than breaking, but still, I expect a lot of points from Philadelphia, 28 implied points from Vegas. It feels like to me it's going to come a lot through the pass game and then probably Jalen Hurts hurting this QB rush EPA that they're going against. Okay. Why is this? Why people enjoyed yesterday when I read the guy 3 wide receiver. I'll try to do it earnestly. 3 wide receiver PPR league. Should I trade away Amon-Ra for Olave and Gibbs? No, I wouldn't do that. Amon-Ra is potentially a wide receiver one. No, I wouldn't do that. All right. Game number 2 here. We're right into the main event here. The Colts offense. Let's pull them up on this screen so you can see their plays. Also, one thing for Philly that I should note, it does seem like Kenneth Gainwell looking less likely to go tomorrow, has a hip issue. Obviously, DeAndre Swift was active in week 1. Rashad Penny was not. That does make me think that perhaps DeAndre Swift is going to be the guy who does see some of the Gainwell role, but it really is probably up in the air because DeAndre Swift got no work in that first game. It was all Gainwell. Something to keep in mind there that's going to be important to watch the news items as we go into the lineup time tomorrow for the showdown. But just keep that in mind here. Both guys, I guess, are theoretically playable if you are in a season-long league, but I would certainly err on the side of saying Swift is probably the one who gets first crack at the role. And then Penny is just a different back. He's just a big-body dude who should be able to create value. I think that he'll find his way onto the field. But it does feel like Swift would get the first kind of Gainwell snaps. Colts in this game, number 2 on the slate, 20.5 implied points for our boy AR. So I talked about yesterday, AR, despite the great fantasy results, was not as great of a play overall analytically as I would like to see. Didn't run as much as you'd like to see either, or get the results running as you would like to see. Did have 10 rushes in there. 4 of them were in the red zone. That is great news for him overall, but still negative 0.2 EPA per dropback, negative 0.24 EPA per pass, negative 0.05 EPA per rush. These are going to get better for AR. I do think they're kind of installing the baseline offense, but it does seem like something that feels not great for him so far. That said, what is great for him is he's going against a Houston D. Gave up 0.3 per QB rush EPA-wise, gave up 0.5 per red zone rush going against them. They also really struggled against play action, giving up 0.5 EPA per play action play, and the Colts ran that at one of the highest rates in the league, 11 play action plays last week. Didn't get a lot of success with it, with negative 0.2 EPA per play action for Anthony Richardson, but I do think in this spot, feels like one where you start to stack up the knowledge they accumulated from week 1. Again, it was all throws to the right side. It was all kind of these safe throws designed to build confidence, to get him into the rhythm, to get him playing fast. I think you start to see that expand outwardly more this week. So the hope would be that AR starts to put up a more meaningful game. It's not a high total, though. This does kind of scream defensive matchup with 20.5 implied points for Indianapolis and 19.5 for Houston. But it definitely feels like something for me with Anthony Richardson that I expect better each week. There's obviously going to be some floor games that come up. We did see Lamar struggle against Houston, but as we talked about yesterday, kind of think that was more Lamar. There were reports all summer long about how he was having a hard time picking up this Baltimore offense, this Todd Monken offense, and just the control that comes with it. So I think with AR here, he doesn't have that control right now. It's just Steichen pulling the strings on him and making him do what he has to do. And AR's job is to show discipline within that framework. But I do think there's some opportunity here that looks pretty good. One guy, too, who did play pretty well in week 1, especially playing out wide, was Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman had 7 targets playing out wide, 0.35 EPA per target. He's now facing a Houston team that got destroyed by these plays. Gave up 0.6 EPA per target out wide compared to 0.03 to the slot, negative 0.4 to tight end, 0.08 to running backs. I think it's another Pittman week. So the price tag for Pittman has come up a little bit, 6,300 on DK, on Underdog. I'm sure the ADP is up in Battle Royales. Of course, I'll do my Battle Royale draft on Friday as part of the fantasy football gauntlet we're doing here. But I think this is a nice spot. It's a low total, so I'm kind of scared off by that. But I think another week for AR to look good, and definitely some things here that stand out. Also, Houston really bad when they ran zone, only ran it 4.5% of the time, but did have a 1.5 EPA on those plays. Also got beat deep a couple times, 1.9 EPA on throws of 20-plus air yards. So there are things to attack for AR. But overall, I think low totals definitely always going to spook me. You got to go with the total first and foremost, and then your data stuff you layer on top of that. I have to be victory lapping Pittman. I mean, I am. I think he looks good, but it's early. I like I talked about last year, like my advance rate last year was a little bit under average heading into the finals or heading into the playoffs on Underdog and on DraftKings. I think it was just at average. The point being, like, what it doesn't matter is like your advance rate week 1 doesn't matter. Your advance rate week 2 doesn't matter. Your advance rate in week 14 kind of matters, but doesn't really. It's just about what happens in the end. So I try to keep it measured, but obviously I'm happy with the results. Got to be happy when the process starts to pay off in front of your eyes. Texans side. So Texans are an interesting team. As I talked about CJ Stroud coming in as a rookie, I thought that things would work out well for him. In this spot, I do think it's going to be another tough one. The Colts overall were pretty good at defending the pass against Trevor Lawrence, who obviously is going to be a more polished product than CJ Stroud is right now. Negative 0.25 EPA per pass by the Colts defense. Negative 0.26 EPA per rush by the Colts defense. And we did still see a pretty good day by Travis Etienne. So it's noteworthy that they actually did perform pretty well overall. Maybe some of that benefiting from Tank Bigsby being useless. And the red zone was where the Colts defense was particularly bad. Colts D was worse than the league, 1.4 EPA per target in the red zone, 0.2 EPA per rush in the red zone. So if Houston gets into the red zone, they actually might be able to create some production. Unfortunately, we'll see how that goes. Doesn't look like there's a lot of red zone production to go around in week 1 for Houston, but I do think there's opportunity. A guy that I really kind of had a blind spot to all offseason, who I highlighted in yesterday's rankings video, Nico Collins was great in week 1. He had 11 intended targets in that game at a 0.3 EPA per target. He did work. He did what he had to do as a potential downfield target and a guy who can have some upside. So I think there's potential for there to be some more opportunity for Houston overall. Also, the Colts, again, really bad defending out wide, 0.8 EPA per target allowed out wide in week 1. So again, that should benefit Nico Collins, who got 4 of his targets out wide. Though Nico got 7 targets out of the slot, which is kind of crazy. Colts in week 1 are basically average defending the slot. So Woods, I guess, also should benefit. Woods was targeted 6 times compared to 4 out wide for Houston in week 1. Obviously, that's pretty much break even. 4 and 6 for 1 week sample size doesn't really matter. But it feels to me like there's something in this game. I think AR with Pittman and a Nico or Woods bring back is kind of interesting. There's also the potential, I guess, that Dameon Pierce could get more involved, but his workload, 14 intended touches, didn't do much with it. It was looked really bad in the advanced analytics with a negative 0.4 EPA, negative 0.9 EPA per target as well. Something's going to go off here. I feel pretty confident in that. What it is, I think those are probably my best guess. No love for Tank. Tank's usage isn't there enough. If you're seeing 10 targets for Woods, 10 targets for Nico, or 10 plus targets for Nico, and you're seeing, what was it? I don't have Tank on this sheet, but I think it was 4 or 5 for Tank. You're basically talking half the volume workload. So I don't think Tank is there yet. I think Tank's bigger upside comes if Woods gets either demoted at some point or Woods gets hurt. That's probably where Tank starts to hit closer to a ceiling. Would I drop Smith and Jigba for Collins or Lockett for Collins? No, I would not. I would not drop JSN or Lockett. You drafted guys as 1 week. Don't move away from guys after 1 week. I think that's the main thing for season long. You have to have diamond hands in season long. That's crazy to give up a guy that you probably drafted at decent capital for Nico. Nico looks good though. But still, Nico went so far behind those guys, you don't want to sink your bet immediately. If you can get Nico for somebody else, get Nico for an also ran guy on your team, but I wouldn't cut JSN or Lockett now. Schultz was terrible. It's talked about yesterday in week 1. This matchup actually looks like, not seeing an EPA for the targets going against Indianapolis. Did Ingram catch anything? I thought he did. Either way, though, didn't track as a real number here in my sheet. So can't really say, but Schultz was pretty unimpressive with what he did in terms of his workload. Did get a good amount of routes, 41 routes in that game on 62 snaps. But I think the receivers here, like Stroud, is going to be more of a downfield presser. So I do think that Schultz, to me, he'll have better weeks, but I'm not seeing it. Really good projection on Schultz from Stochastic, though, for whatever that's worth. Did I switch? Yeah, I switched. All right, let's go to Chicago and Tampa Bay. Sorry, too many things. I also have a football in my hands. I got too many things going on. Of course, degree-branded football, the only football I trust. All right, Bears. What did the Bears do in week 1? So 19 implied points for the Bears in this game. Tampa Bay, 22 implied points. Tampa Bay gave up a lot of passes under 20 yards, had a 68% attempt rate under 20 yards, only gave up 5% past 20 air yards. When they did give up the deep ball to Minnesota in week 1, they got killed. 3.1 EPA on those plays. Of course, we all probably saw the red zone play or the red zone on red zone, the play that went to Jordan Addison, the bomb that went his way. Certainly one here where Chicago, if you're trying to attack downfield in a similar way, I would think that's Darnell Mooney. It doesn't seem like the deep targets are necessarily going to go to DJ Moore. DJ Moore played well for the 2 targets he had, but it does feel like Mooney was the one who was targeted a little more downfield, higher air yards per catch or per target overall, 8.7 for Mooney compared to 6.5 for DJ Moore. A lot of Justin Fields' throws were short, though, so you really do want to see them kind of press him forward a little bit more and allow him to get loose. But also, again, Tampa Bay, bad outside, defending wideouts, playing out wide, 0.4 EPA per target out wide. DJ Moore had 1 target out wide. Mooney got all of his out of the slot, so I guess this could be a rebound game for DJ Moore. Not a bad price tag for him on DraftKings at 5,500. DJ Moore in a bounce back spot against Tampa Bay team that got killed outside does feel like the most noteworthy thing here. Against the run, Tampa Bay was actually really good. Negative 0.4 EPA per rush puts him towards the best part of the league in run defense. Khalil Herbert got the most work. Of course, we did see Deonta Foreman mix in. Roshan Johnson was pure garbage time, so I wouldn't necessarily bank on him yet. He's going to earn the role over a course of a year, but I think for right now, I would not necessarily go flocking to Roshan if you are trying to play him in DFS especially. 2 targets and more is so deflating. Don't have any shares, but that's wild. I think it's just the matchup. I mean, we have seen, the Packers shut down similar teams, similar players, really good outside receivers. So again, I don't think you want to hold that against DJ Moore. It's just tough when obviously you see guys go off in the preseason as much as Moore and Fields did. People want to see that happen immediately. And sometimes it takes a while to come together. Like they did that, small sample size in the preseason. Now you're playing real teams who are really game planning and not just trying out guys to see if they're going to make the roster. So it does change the equation a little bit. The Bucs side, so Rachaad White going to certainly be a player worth talking about here. Was awful in week 1, had one of the worst rush yards over expectation numbers, which is not one that I sweat too much, but is certainly something to think about when you do hear it a lot. Rachaad White just left a lot in the field there. He had a negative 0.4 EPA per rush, which is insane given that he did have as many touches as he did, 19 intended touches in that game. Also had negative 0.2 EPA per pass. So really bad start for Rachaad White. It's not going to get better, it looks like, against Chicago's defense. Chicago did a pretty good job defensively against the Packers, who, Aaron Jones broke one big play in that game, but a negative 0.25 EPA per rush overall, negative 0.25 QB rush overall allowed by the Chicago D. Not that Baker's a big threat, but it does seem like they're defending the run pretty well. What they are not defending well is going to be the pass. That's why Jordan Love had the big game that he had. 0.38 EPA per pass, 0.34 EPA per target. Those are the bottom of the league numbers right now for Chicago, a team that was also bottom of the league last year and made no meaningful additions. So the Baker Mayfield hope train feels like it might go to 2-0 here. I think this is a pretty good spot for Mike Evans again. Mike Evans had 9 targets outside last week, good for a 0.2 EPA. He's facing a Chicago team that last week gave up a 0.8 EPA every single time a wide out was targeted out wide. They did defend the slot pretty well, negative 0.45 EPA per target there, but also 0.9 EPA per target to tight end, 0.92 EPA per target to running backs. Feels like a spot that Tampa Bay's offense actually could go off here. Go off is relative. It's only a 22-point implied total. It is Baker Mayfield still. Go off is all on the spectrum of going off. That said, this Bears D is so bad. They also were terrible and they generated pressure on 11% of snaps, gave up a 0.4 EPA, which is one of the worst marks in the league. They also, when they didn't get pressure, which was 89% of the time, gave up a 0.34 EPA. They also didn't defend the red zone well. Tampa Bay, something's going to go off for Tampa Bay here. I'm pretty confident in that. This Bears defense is not good. And Baker, these numbers aren't going to hold, but he did have a 0.05 EPA per dropback. Also had almost a 1 EPA per dropback when he was going outside the pocket, which is crazy. Very small sample size for him getting out of the pocket. I would attack Chicago's D. I would aggressively attack Chicago's D this week. If I had Pittman, would you attempt to swap him for Olave for a season long or too neutral of a trade? I wouldn't trade Pittman personally, but I do think that would be a fair one if you got Olave back. Olave going to get more downfield targets. Derek Carr looked really great pressing downfield. I don't think you need to make that trade, but if you're just trying to go purely off of ADPs with Pittman, with where he was drafted, you're kind of immediately getting value in that respect. So I would hold Pittman, but I wouldn't begrudge you for taking that trade. Let's go on to the next game. We got Kansas City with 27 implied points. Jacksonville rematch to the playoffs last year. Let's look at this one on the matchup screen. Of course, got to have the visual element for you guys, even though, does this add anything really? Does this? I don't know. Maybe it does for somebody out there. Kansas City, Going against a Jacksonville defense that completely shut down the run. Some of that you have to give the credit to Deion Jackson with just being awful last week, but a negative 0.4 EPA per rush is actually the lowest mark in the league. Jacksonville also didn't give up anything deep, though they didn't really try anything deep on the Colts side, but Jacksonville did have a negative 3.2 EPA per target on deep throws. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is going to immediately make that one positively regress, but something to point out there. It looks like Jacksonville's weakest spot was receivers out wide. Give up 0.2 EPA per target to receivers out wide. So that does seem like it would benefit really all the guys. They all got one target running out wide. Pacheco got one running out wide. Tony got one running out wide. MVS got one running out wide. And he was the only good receiver in that game, according to advanced analytics. Sky Moore got one out wide. Noah Gray got one out wide. Who benefits in this game, I think would be hard to say. Feels like maybe this might be a little bit choppier of a game. I don't know that Jacksonville's defense is good, but it does feel like they put enough on tape in week one that feels like a defense that's a little more lively here. I'm not sure if this game is going to be chalky DFS-wise. I think with how bad Sky Moore was, all the Kadarius Toney drops and all that stuff, people might be afraid to go here. But I do kind of wonder if maybe this is another bad game for Kansas City, maybe another bad game for Jacksonville. The total is certainly saying it should be a shootout. But if this game gets chalky ownership-wise, if ETR and Stochastic are projecting a lot of ownership for this game, I might be inclined to stay away a little bit, or at least not go crazy above the field. I think there's a little bit of a risk point here. On the Jacksonville side, let's pull that up here. Chiefs D was pretty game against Detroit, I think we can all say, but certainly did leave some stuff on the field that looks like that could be positives to take away from. Negative EPAs across the board per drop back, per pass, per rush, per QB rush, per red zone pass. Where they did struggle was in the passing formations against playing man rather, gave up 0.4 EPA per target against zone or in zone rather, gave up 0.3 EPA per target. And sorry for the misspeaks here. I'm obviously talking more from the offensive side. Where Kansas City was weakest was out wide. Calvin Ridley was the one who dominated out wide in week one for Jacksonville, had 7 targets outside, good for 0.6 EPA per. Evan Ingram, that's why Evan Ingram didn't generate any EPA numbers for Indianapolis. He only was targeted out wide and in the slot, was not targeted as a traditional inline tight end, which is kind of interesting. Looks like actually nobody on Jacksonville was targeted last week as an inline tight end. So I don't know what that means, but it is kind of an interesting noteworthy trend to point out. They are just basically targeting Ingram as though he's a slot receiver who moves outside more than an actual tight end, at least so far. Kirk looked bad. Kirk didn't do anything outside. I think this is a Ridley spot again. Ridley people, I feel like, certainly a loud, vocal crowd of people who drove up his ADP throughout the offseason, and he is in the best spot here. Kansas City giving up 0.7 EPA per target out wide, 0.7 to running backs as well. So Ridley and ATN kind of stand out the most. Zay Jones actually got most of his targets out of the slot, which is honestly even worse news for Christian Kirk. Zay Jones got no targets out wide, got 7 out of the slot. Christian Kirk only got 3 out of the slot and none out wide. So I would really, people talking about Kirk in the chat, almost dropped Kirk for Zay Jones. I don't think it's over for Kirk. I don't think it's over for anybody. It's week one. This is really concerning usage for Christian Kirk, where if Zay Jones is not, like, the whole thesis of Zay Jones was that he was going to play over Kirk and the 2 wide receiver sets and play outside. If he's playing in the slot and also getting targeted twice as much in the slot, that's really bad for Christian Kirk. So for season long, look, I think you're selling at a low point. If you could bump Christian Kirk into a trade and get it part of a bigger thing, I wouldn't hate it. Things will get better for Kirk, but I don't trust that he's going to hit even the 11.6 projection I'm seeing from a Stochastic. This is really bad usage for Christian Kirk. Did have 42 snaps, ran 22 routes, but man, targeting is really not good for him. And again, ATN, I'll highlight. ATN looked good. ATN got volume. Still think Tank Bigsby is going to come from over the course of a year, though if he keeps playing like he did in week one, that's probably not going to happen. But ATN had 5 targets. Again, this is a pretty poor running back defense team in terms of the pass game, so it could be potential for ATN to go off there. ATN also got a ton of volume overall in the run game at 18 rushes. It might be a nice ATN spot. I'm not the biggest ATN believer. The usage so far looks pretty good. So ATN Ridley, I think, would stand out on the Jacksonville side the most. And maybe you could put him together with Trevor Lawrence, and that could be your QB +2. Don't hate that idea for big tournaments, even though, again, it comes down to the ownership first and foremost. Chargers. Let's talk about the Chargers. They get 24 implied points. They're paying Kirk a lot of money. I feel like they have to get him involved. Maybe. I mean, I would normally agree, but it's the usage is what the usage is. It doesn't look good. Chargers 24 implied points facing a Tennessee Titans defense, as we talked about, is bad downfield, but also it feels like they've gotten bad in other facets of the pass game. Tennessee negative 0.2 EPA per rush allowed, but 0.06 EPA per dropback, 0.07 EPA per pass. That does show a little bit of weakness for the teams going against them to produce above average. 0.2 EPA per red zone rush, so they actually were terrible defending the rush in the red zone as well. And then they tightened up in the pass game, negative 0.2 EPA per red zone pass. So bad versus the pass, but better in short space. So that really just opens things up downfield. The downfield target beneficiary in week one, where we did not see the Kellen Moore offense for the Chargers stretch downfield as much as you would think. Maybe it's similar to the Anthony Richardson thing, where you're trying to build the trust within the framework of the offense first before you extend down. But it did stand out as being kind of surprising that we didn't see the Chargers press downfield. Looks like Justin Herbert only threw 3 deep targets in that game. Excuse me. So I'm not sure what you would attack here. The weak spot seems to be for Tennessee out wide. Keenan Allen got the most targets out wide, 5 targets compared to 3 for Mike Williams, 2 for Quentin Johnson. Keenan Allen also got 4 targets out of the slot. He looked better than Mike Williams there as well. Mike Williams did not perform well in the slot in this one game, though we did get 2 targets there. I think it's Keenan Allen again. Keenan Allen showed me something in that game. I thought that he looked spry, looked lively, even got a couple rushes in that one and avoided tackles on him. I think this is kind of an interesting spot for Keenan Allen. I really feel like Tennessee's defense now over the course of 2 straight years has been pretty bad defending downfield. If you see them start to extend more downfield as a Chargers offense, I think it's going to look pretty good. Josh Kelly, I also have to plant a flag here for, not for my own takes. I do think this could be a trap spot for Josh Kelly, where he's going to get the volume. Obviously, the volume is important, but we saw what Jamal Williams did last week with volume against Tennessee. Josh Kelly and Jamal Williams, not 1-to-1. Austin Eckler and Jamal Williams, even less 1-to-1. But if Austin Eckler doesn't go this week with his ankle issues, I think people are going to flock to Josh Kelly, given that he did have 17 intended touches in a game where Eckler was healthy. I would worry that he's going to get that same upside here in this week. I think he'll be the chalk play at 5K on DraftKings. Maybe the pass game work gets him there a little bit more. We saw 5 targets last week for Austin Eckler, just 1 for Josh Kelly. So clearly they showed a desire to use Kelly just as a rusher. If he's just a rusher in this game, it's going to go poorly. If he gets full workload, if he gets the equivalent of 38 rushes and 6 targets, he's going to get there. But I would watch out for Josh Kelly. I'm intrigued by that one. Feels like a Herbert game, potentially. I think that's it. These charts give up a real Pepe Sylvia vibe. Blame Fantasy Labs. I did the best I could. Though my data sheet is not much better. My data sheet is even uglier, and I feel like your eyes would glaze over even more. So that's why we're using the Fantasy Labs matchup tool, which is, there's a better one out there to visualize stuff. Let me know, because I could not find one for the life of me searching last night and this morning. All right, Titans side of things. Titans going against the Chargers defense that got strafed last week. That is a large part because of Miami. Miami does force the ball downfield at a high rate. We saw Tua take 8 deep shots. That was the most in the league by a wide margin. Also, Tyreek getting 15 targets worth over 215 air yards, I think. So really, it's a different offense than any other one you're going to see out there. That said, you can beat the Chargers defense downfield, as we saw. 0.5 EPA per drop back allowed, 0.51 EPA per pass. They got killed by Tua. Ryan Tannehill's not Tua, obviously. It may shock you to hear. Ryan Tannehill's not Tua. I know ball. We got negative 0.5 EPA per rush for Tannehill, negative 0.4 EPA per pass. I guess the player that you would look at right away would be DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins got a lot more targets out of the slot than out wide, 9 targets out of the slot compared to 4 out wide. The good news for him, the good news for the Titans, is that the Chargers were bad everywhere. They gave up a 0.7 EPA to guys playing out wide, gave up a 0.5 EPA to guys playing out the slot, gave up a 0.9 EPA to tight ends, did defend running backs pretty well, so they had a negative 0.4 EPA there. So maybe Tyjae Spears is not the week that he goes off. Though worth pointing out, despite all the routes that Tyjae Spears ran, we did see 3 running back targets for Derrick Henry, only 2 for Tyjae Spears. So Derrick Henry's still involved enough for PPR points. So obviously going to be hard for him to have the full ceiling if Tyjae's going to get that work. I think this is a Hopkins spot. 6,700 price tag on DraftKings feels pretty good. Defense that doesn't get great pressure, and when they did get pressure against Miami, they got really poor results. 0.9 EPA when getting pressure against Miami last week did the Chargers get. When they were not pressuring, they also had a 0.5 EPA, so they were really shockingly bad when getting home. Again, Tannehill's not Tua, so I don't have the same level of faith here. And I also, the coaching, like I don't have the same level of faith in Tennessee's offense as I do a guy like Mike McDaniel calling plays for Miami. There's a spot though for Tennessee to go off. So I would have some interest in the Tennessee offense just to see, like, is it all Miami side or is that the Chargers maybe have some weaknesses that Miami exploited? I kind of can go either way, but I do think it's worth, just because of how bad they were, it's probably worth getting some Hopkins, maybe some Burks, though Burks played 57 snaps, ran 35 routes, actually ran more routes than Hopkins did. Hopkins ran 34. So I guess Burks is in play too. And Chig to a lesser extent, 52 snaps, 31 routes. Can Tannehill create multiple pass catchers who make a lineup with Derrick Henry still there? Probably not. So I would be inclined to not stack this one up too much, I think. Though maybe if you're entering 150, maybe you do. Maybe you do. Smash that like and subscribe. I agree with that. Please help us out here. Of course, you guys are seeing my process every single day here on the channel. This is what I do, minus the Fantasy Labs thing. So please subscribe down below, hit the like button, leave a comment here. Splash Play in the march to 3K subs. We appreciate every little support, a little bit of support that we can get around here. And of course, hit the join button as well. If you want to see the data that I'm looking at and referencing here, I do give that out to Splash Play members who are on the channel here. So hit the join button, $4.99 a month. You get a cool little helmet next to your name. You get custom emojis, and you also get my data sheet here that I cull from a few different places. Let's go on to the next game. We got Seattle getting 20.5 implied points. Detroit getting 26.5 implied points. This game, of course, has been a shootout in the past. In this particular configuration, we'll see Seattle really impotent in week one. But let's talk about the Detroit defense as it relates to Seattle. Detroit was pretty bad against tight end. That was their biggest weakness in that game, which is surprising given that we didn't see a ton of production from Noah Gray, but did see Noah Gray, did see a Blake Bell touchdown, so that all makes sense. Feels like the way to attack, again, would be tight end. The issue is that the biggest tight end target they had in week one for Seattle was Will Dissly getting 2 targets for 0.76 out of the tight end slot. Noah Fant, it looks like, did nothing. Noah Fant had 25 snaps, ran 13 routes. Dissly had 16 snaps, ran 7 routes. So tight end is not going to be it. Sometimes, though, tight ends can't kind of be a proxy for a weakness against slot receivers. Last week, it does look like Detroit was overall just average against slot receivers, negative 0.01 EPA per target there. But maybe we do see more targets going to Metcalf, Lockett. I guess if Lockett's healthy, we'll see. JSN was the most targeted out of the slot. He had 2 targets compared to 1 for Metcalf and Lockett running out of the slot. It all comes down to Geno, though. Like, is Geno back to old bad Geno? Was that one aberration game? As I mentioned before, do kind of think he was due for a run bad with how hot he ran in the first half of last year, and we saw it fractionally throughout the back half of last year. It feels like a good get well spot if they do target Metcalf, Lockett, JSN well. Again, assuming Lockett is actually able to go. Yeah, I think you got to play JSN in this game, especially if Lockett's out. JSN gains an appeal. Metcalf, not a high target guy out of the slot, does get more outside. But I think that's it, because I just can't imagine that Seattle's all of a sudden going to go heavy targeting Noah Fant, targeting Will Dissly when they were barely involved. I think that does mean you're going to see more snaps for the receivers playing like kind of de facto tight end, and that should benefit JSN. So I think maybe this is a spot for JSN to get well. On Detroit's side, Detroit going against the Seattle D that obviously got absolutely obliterated last week, gave Matthew Stafford the fountain of youth there for him to look like the best version of himself ever. In this particular spot, of course, there are going to be a lot of things that look bad for Seattle's defense. 0.42 EPA per dropback allowed, 0.43 EPA per pass. On QB rushes, they also gave up a 0.84 EPA, which is not going to matter for Jared Goff. Jared Goff ran 5 times in that game. So maybe Jared Goff has a little bit of upside at QB running the ball if you do want to play him in your season-long leagues. 0.4 EPA per red zone rush allowed by Seattle. So this should bode well for Detroit to get production. The way that you're going to get production, at least from a 1-week sample size against Seattle, is going to be pretty much anywhere that's not running back targets. 0.5 EPA per target allowed to wideouts playing out wide. 0.5 EPA per target to the slot. 0.5 EPA per target to the tight end. So maybe a Goff double can get there this week. Amon-Ra moves around the field. He had 7 targets in the slot, only 1 out wide. Josh Reynolds was the one who really got targeted the most out wide, had 6 compared to just 1 for Marvin Jones, which was terrible. Marvin Jones, in fact, is terrible. I think Detroit stacks are live in this game. I think the running backs are also live. The volume for Montgomery. This is one where I think you could play a QB +3. I think it wouldn't be crazy to play Goff, Amon-Ra, Laporta with David Montgomery. Less inclined to go to Jahmyr Gibbs right now. I just don't think the running game work is going to be there for him, even though I think he is a back with more juice than Montgomery. And we all have already seen basically that Montgomery is going to be playing some amount of Jamal Williams. I still expect over the course of a year that Jamal Williams, that new Jamal Williams, David Montgomery's touches are going to come down a little bit and Gibbs's will come up. To start the year, though, I think that I would gravitate more towards Montgomery, but I think QB +3s here are going to come up in Sims, and I'll be happy to get it because I think this is a spot where if Seattle is as bad as we saw last week, it might not be that the Rams are great. It might be that Seattle's that bad. I think that's certainly a possibility. Seattle's tackles are out a while. It might be good. Might be a good game. Unfortunately, we'll see it in the second half. Possibly. Just bought a Splash Play coffee mug. Wish the cap was offered in black. Shock. Yes. Go check the link down below. Pete's got the Splash Play merch on the store, and I think again the helmet, Splash Play helmet's the coolest logo in the game. I'll defend that until I die. 7th game on the board. We got Green Bay. Green Bay, of course, an interesting team, a team that I have talked up all offseason, talked a lot about my love. Also, look at this fucking ad here. I can't block it with ad block. Who's a roto doc? I only have one doctor in my life, and that's Dr. Ben Rasa at Stochastic, who I once dubbed on one of our shows back in the day. I started calling him the doctor because I thought it'd be funny. This guy, though, I don't think this is charming at all. I find that less than appealing for me. All right, Green Bay, 21 implied points. Atlanta, 19.5 implied points. So not a lot of love for this matchup. As I talked about, actually, so this is a nice one to see to make me feel good about my takes. I thought the Atlanta defense was one of the worst in the league last year. They then made enough additions in free agency, deliberate additions to make this defense better that I thought they would be better. They look like it from 1 week of sample here. -0.3 EPA per rush, one of the best marks in the league. -0.9 EPA per red zone rush, also one of the best marks in the league. -0.3 EPA per pass, -0.28 EPA per drop back. This team looks solid defensively. This is not the Falcons of last year, at least from the 1 week sample size. That said, Green Bay was really explosive. They did create a lot of value for themselves. Jordan Love was a 0.4 EPA per pass guy. Kind of forced the ball downfield, though overall only had a 9.7 intended air yard per attempt. So he was kind of keeping it relatively distributed there. And they did play Bryce, though. That's fair. Bryce, not a great debut for Bryce. Really only got Hayden Hurst going. And, of course, not great for Terrace Marshall in that game. But maybe the Atlanta defense is just good. Like, they did, give you the signal with the guys that they signed at free agency to try to be a better defense. So I think that's in play. Based on the totals here, I think Green Bay can win this one. It just feels like it's not going to be a high volume of deep shots and great plays. Christian Watson being back in would help a lot. I think he's certainly on turf, would be a dangerous player to be going against. Hopefully it doesn't hurt his hamstring again. It seems to be the case for everybody on turf. But nothing obvious here that I do think is worth attacking. It does feel like Atlanta bad against play action, potentially 0.5 EPA per play action play. But they didn't face a lot of it either. There were only 4 play action attempts for Carolina in week 1 against them. I think if you make this bet, you make the bet just on Jordan Love being good again and playing in a dome. I think that's how you make the bet on Green Bay. But really, there's nothing standing out here that I think, at least from the 1 week sample, is that good. They are pretty bad defending the red zone. In the past was Atlanta, 0.8 EPA allowed on red zone passes. So maybe you see some of the guys getting targets in the red zone. Watson would be one of those if he's back. Dobbs would be if Watson is not back. Maybe there's some opportunity there, but it doesn't feel the strongest in the world. Let's talk about the Atlanta side. Imagine Drake London actually getting 2 targets. That's all he needs. Think you need more than that to be useful in fantasy. Of course, Atlanta really starved their receivers out last week. Here they are on the board. You look at the numbers that Fantasy Labs provides. Weaknesses for Green Bay's defense. Bad against QB runs. Unfortunately, Desmond Ridder only ran once in that last game, despite being what's theoretically a rushing QB. That's whole part of the thesis of Desmond Ridder, why they keep giving him so much leash. He only ran 1 time in that game. That said, QB rush for Green Bay's D, 0.4 EPA per QB rush. Obviously, that was going against Justin Fields, so we'll see how that holds with a normal QB or a more normal QB. Red zone rush, they give a 0.6 EPA per play. That's really bad in the red zone. 0.4 EPA per red zone pass. So Green Bay was good everywhere besides once you got in the red zone against them. So maybe a team that's not great in short space, kind of the opposite of what we talked about with Tennessee. Who would I go to here? I mean, 1 target out wide for Drake London, 1 target out wide for Mac Hollins. 3 targets in the slot for Mac, 2 targets in the slot for Pitts, 1 traditional tight end target for Pitts in week 1. Bijan got targets everywhere, but he got one running out of the slot. Bijan got a tight end target, I guess a technical tight end target. I don't think he was actually lined up, and I don't recall seeing him in tight end formation, but maybe he was. And then 4 targets as a running back. This honestly just feels like it benefits Tyler Algier. If I'm being real with you guys, I know I'm in the bag for Tyler Algier. Big Tyler Algier. I've been steaming this one up for a year and change now. I think there's another Algier smash spot. We saw 29 snaps in that game, 18 intended touches. His 62% intended touch rate for Tyler Algier would be one of the highest marks in the league. He avoided tackles at a 20% clip, double what Bijan Robinson avoided in week 1. I think Algier's it, man. I think Bijan's still in the hunt. Like, Bijan's going to get similar touches. He's fine. I cannot trust this pass game to do anything. I think it comes down to Bijan and Algier again. And if we see an outlier day, it's probably because, or for London and maybe even Pitts, it's probably because we saw more production from Green Bay side. I think it's the only way that it gets there. Yeah, Algier Nation, stand up. I agree. People are going to keep slamming the table for Pitts. I'll make the case for Pitts, like, for what he did with his 2 targets. They looked pretty good. I mean, he got 3 in total, but the 2 playing out of the slot, 1.5 EPA on those 2 targets. So it's not his fault. Like, he's still good. It's just like, I didn't draft Pitts much. I think I drafted London even below the field just because I love every young receiver, but I just didn't think there was going to be enough volume for both guys. Let alone if Mac Hollins got anything, let alone if Bijan and Algier run 35 times like I thought. And I think the 35 times for those 2 running backs being the case, I think that's actually how it's going to be. So we'll see. Let's keep it going, though. Game number 8. I hope this provides you guys some useful info. Of course, if you have any feedback, let me know. Here on Splash Play, we're rebuilding the content flow, but I do want to kind of have it be a progressive information thing where we do the showdowns, of course, Mondays and Thursdays. Then we start the info flow by ranking everybody on Tuesdays. And on Wednesdays, we kind of dig a little deeper on the matchups. And then by Friday, hopefully it comes all together in the fantasy football gauntlet. That's going to be the process here on the channel until we can figure out when we can get Pete back in the mix. Raiders, 18.8 implied points going against Buffalo. Buffalo, a 9.5 point favorite at home. Jimmy G looked great in week 1. Buffalo's D also looked pretty good in week 1. Negative 0.2 EPA per drop back, negative 0.1 EPA per pass, getting a little bit closer to average there. 0.1 EPA per rush allowed, 0.5 EPA per QB rush allowed, which is interesting because Jimmy G did run 9 times in week 1. I don't expect that to be the case, but it's certainly possible that Jimmy G runs a little bit and actually has some success. That's kind of interesting. Garoppolo last week was really good when he was able to stay in the pocket. 0.3 EPA per drop back playing in the pocket, compared to a negative 0.2 EPA when he was going outside the pocket. So if things break down for Jimmy G, that's probably how you would see this total be that low. If I were going to attack anything in Buffalo, I mean, the Jets just really put so little on tape against them that I don't know what you would attack and go off the Jets and like what the Jets had success with. What, catch fucking bullshit one-handers like Garrett Wilson? I don't know. That'd be my advice for the Raiders going against Buffalo. And nothing here really stands out. I guess Josh Jacobs, running back EPA does look pretty bad for Buffalo. 0.8 EPA per target on those plays that Buffalo gave up last week to the running backs. Jacobs was targeted 3 times in the running back pass game. Jameer White targeted once. I think that this could be a game where maybe Vegas tries to ugly it up and lean on Jacobs a little bit more. So Jacobs, I guess, in play, maybe he would be contrarian because people do fear Buffalo a little bit. But Buffalo also didn't even get tested. No deep throws by the Jets last week to target that. So it's just like, you don't know what Buffalo is yet. Obviously, historically, they've been a good defense. I would still expect that. But the Raiders, I think, are a well-run team. I think they're a tight offense. So I wouldn't be shocked to see some success and to see, I think in particular, Josh Jacobs, I think, be used as long as they can keep Buffalo at bay on the other side, which we'll see. Vegas's defense, average everywhere, negative 0.01 EPA per dropback, negative 0.01 EPA per pass, negative 0.05 EPA per rush. That's basically league average, a little bit worse than that, I guess. In terms of where they defended and were the weakest, they were the weakest against the slot, 0.34 EPA per target against the slot. Stephon Diggs got the most slot targets there with 4 of them. He also had 9 targets out wide. The Raiders were a positive EPA team out wide as well, 0.06. Could be a smash day for Stephon Diggs. I think there's going to be a lot of smash days for Stephon Diggs. I'm a big believer in him. He was one of my highest drafted guys in Best Ball Mania and DraftKings. I still am on his team here. $8,000 salary. No Tyreek on the slate. No Justin Jefferson on the slate. I think that Stephon Diggs, if you're drafting battle royales right now, I think this is a pretty nice spot for Diggs to get off and really nice spot for Diggs to get off, but a really nice spot for him to go off in a meaningful way and maybe have one of those high ceiling days. So I would say that Diggs looks like the best part of this to me. Good usage for James Cook as well. Did have 41 snaps in that game, but besides that, I think it's Diggs or bust. I think this is the year really where Diggs cements himself, where he's obviously been a guy who's shown the ceiling before, but I get the feel that also with some of his griping in the offseason, this has got to be the year where Diggs like puts it down. 13 intended targets in game one. I think that could be the case here as long as Buffalo doesn't completely boat race him, which is possible, but I think the Raiders were spunky, so I would definitely be willing to go to Diggs. Baltimore, one of the least impressive teams of week one. They get 21.3 implied points in this game, going against Cincinnati, who's got 24.8 implied points on their side, despite a similarly disappointing week one. All right, so we got really bad QB rush defense for Cincinnati. They gave up 0.94 EPA per QB rush. Obviously, with Lamar, he still did run 6 times in that last game against Houston, even though didn't have to run as much, I guess, or wasn't schemed to run as much. Cincinnati also very bad defending red zone rushes, 0.8 EPA are allowed per red zone rush. So it does seem like a spot for Cincinnati where they give up the things that Lamar is best at. So this is a Lamar bounce back spot. In the past game, the only guy that mattered was Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers got most of his targets in the slot. I had 7 targets in the slot compared to 3 out wide. And I don't know where, because he got 2 more, right? But Zay got two rushes, so that's why. So Zay got 10 targets, most of them coming out of the slot. Last week, Cincinnati was pretty good defending out wide, actually really good defending out wide, negative 1.01 EPA. So that's really one of the stronger marks of the league, defending wideouts, playing out wide. Against the slot, just kind of a basic negative 0.2. They were the worst defending tight ends, but not a ton of volume, I think, going against them tight end wise. So that might be a bit flimsy, but a 0.6 EPA allowed to tight ends, 0.5 EPA allowed to running backs on pass plays. Play action was really bad for Cincinnati as well. 0.4 EPA allowed there along with 10 attempts. And they did run a good amount of play action for Baltimore. Lamar had a 0.4 EPA on those plays, ran 7 of them in play action in week one. I think it's a Lamar spot. I don't know that I fully trust Zay Flowers with the rising price tag. But I think that's it. I think if you're going to stack these guys up, I would rather not do the running back guesswork. Gus Edwards is kind of a traditional plotter, power back, sledgehammer back. Justice Hill, a little more of an elusive pass game back, kind of a Jahmyr Gibbs type. I think they both have opportunity in this offense. I think they both have roles in this offense. So I don't know that I would really want to make a stand on either, with them both being priced $5,300 and $4,900 on DK. I think it's Lamar and Zay again. And Bateman and Beckham were fine, but neither is going to get the volume, I think. So I would rather go Zay Flowers. I think that's the stack that looks the most appealing here. And, and Mark Andrews, if he's out there. I think if Mark Andrews plays, that probably does hurt Zay a good amount. So you could maybe get the double there. I think a Lamar, Andrews, Zay double, where you're also maybe getting some Lamar's rushing upside, could be a thing that pays off. But it does feel it's a risky spot overall for Baltimore, even though the matchup, Cincinnati did not show much in a game where, Cleveland didn't look that great, but numerically does feel like it's a little bit better. Cincinnati on their side, going against a Baltimore D that did not give up anything against Houston, which is surprising given the production overall. Like, CJ Stroud did a good job. Everything looks bad for the Baltimore D. Negative 0.2 EPA per dropback, negative 0.3 EPA per pass, negative 0.4 EPA per rush, negative 0.2 EPA per QB rush, negative 0.6 per red zone rush, negative 1.2 per red zone pass. Baltimore did their thing in that game. The weakest spot was against slot players, gave up a 0.3 EPA there. Most targets out of the slot goes to Jamar Chase. He had 4 in week one compared to 5 out wide. Higgins had 6 out wide compared to 2 in the slot. Tyler Boyd slid 3 out of the slot. Irv Smith had 2 out of the slot. So maybe they get going through the slot in this game for Cincinnati. Obviously, Cincinnati needs to do something to improve on what they showed in week one. I think they will. Though Baltimore was bad. It was really tough against play action. Negative 1.4 EPA against play action is what they did in week one as well. And that's not a huge part of Cincinnati's game either. So maybe it'll be tough again for Burrow. I think he can get some bounce back going, but I don't think it's going to be easy sledding against Baltimore for Joe Burrow and the boys. So nothing standing out here. Would rather have the Lamar double on the other side personally. Giants. Staley is out. So is Baltimore center. There we go. Giants. I'm just going to keep saying Giants till I scroll over there. Giants playing against a team that is not going to be very good this year, the Arizona Cardinals. Giants 5.5-point favorites, 22.8 implied points for them against 17.3 for Arizona. Stuff that I would try to attack on Arizona's defense. Arizona looks like did okay for the most part. Oh, this is a Daniel Jones week. Arizona was very bad defending QB runs, 1.1 EPA per rush allowed on QB runs. They were better in the red zone, better against traditional run plays. But Daniel Jones ran 13 times against Dallas. If he is going to do the similar thing this week, and obviously that's the main appeal of Daniel Jones' ability to run, feels like this is a pretty good spot for Daniel Jones. I don't trust any of his receivers. The weakest spot to attack again for the Cardinals is going to be out of the slot. It's usually the case. Slots tends to be the weakest spot. That's why when it does stand out more so when teams are bad defending guys out wide. Guy who was targeted the most out of the slot was Darren Waller. He had 4. Darius Slayton had 2. Saquon Barkley had 1. And that was the only good play Saquon produced, it looks like, was the one that he had out of the slot. I think it's Daniel Jones. I think maybe Daniel Jones and Darren Waller. I think that kind of makes sense here. Don't expect a Saquon bounce back day here. A negative 0.2 EPA per rush allowed again by the Cardinals defense last week against the run game. Yeah, I would fade Saquon again here. Obviously, I'm not a Saquon believer. You can talk me into fading Saquon a lot, but I do think this feels a lot more like a Daniel Jones spot than a Saquon spot. We'll see. At some point, Saquon's got to have one good week, but I don't think this is it. Giants have to bounce back against Arizona. I think so. I mean, it looks like it. I think on the strength of Daniel Jones, seems like they could do it. Cardinals side, the Giants were very bad defensively last week against Dallas. So I guess if there were ever a game where there'd be production for the Cardinals, this could be it. The Giants basically average in every dropback 0 per dropback EPA, 0 EPA per pass, 0 EPA per rush. So basically they were just average. They just kind of allowed Dallas to do whatever it wanted last week for the most part, which does check out with what we saw on tape. QB rush plays, Giants giving up 0.3 EPA per QB rush, giving up 0.4 EPA per red zone rush. I can't talk you guys into a Cardinal. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's right to do for anybody. If the game stays close, James Conner can get there. He did have 52 snaps, did have 19 intended touches in that game. That looks pretty good. Also ran 19 routes. I think Conner is it. Marquise Brown got enough work where maybe you could talk yourself into it. 6 targets across 25 routes, 52 snaps. But to me, I think it's quite literally right now, James Conner or nothing. And James Conner looks okay for whatever it's worth. So shout out to all the James Conner guys. That ain't it. All right. Niners, 26.5 implied points for the Niners. Let's see what they got. Oh, come on. Click. You hate when the site that you've only used once for giving you visual aids, it doesn't work. We got it. Niners going against the Rams. So the Rams obviously did a good job last week on paper against Seattle. It seems like that was mostly Seattle's impotence fault. The Rams basically average against the brush. It looks like a 0 flat EPA per play, negative 0.1 EPA per dropback, negative 0.13 EPA per pass, 0.23 EPA per QB rush for the Rams. Nothing bad. They just seem like an average team that faced a team that couldn't produce against them. So the Niners are not an average team. The Niners are a great team that produces against everybody. So I think it's kind of the same with the Niners, where Ayuk obviously stood out a lot in that game. Best game possibly of his career in that one, I think we saw against Pittsburgh. I have no issue going to Ayuk again, though he is not going to stay as hot as he did. He had a 1.7 EPA per pass. That's impossible. The best EPA per pass last year was Rashid Shaheed with, I think, a 0.75 EPA per, and obviously that's low volume. So I would expect Ayuk to start kind of coming down eventually here. Besides that, though, it's a Christian McCaffrey spot. I think, though, for whatever it's worth, the Rams did defend running back targets pretty well, negative 0.7 EPA per running back target. That said, Christian McCaffrey is not Kenneth Walker. He is not Zach Charbonnet. So it does feel like just whatever you expect from the Niners, per usual. Wouldn't go flocking my way over to them, but I do think they're in a good spot, as they usually are going to be. Rams 18-point implied point. Wow. So bad total for the Rams. This feels like the spot where the Rams come back down to earth. Obviously, last week we saw huge games for the combined Cooper Kupp role from Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua. I think certainly these guys are going to have their shots in terms of volume. That said, negative 0.09 EPA per slot target allowed by San Francisco in week one, just a 0.01 flat allowed out wide. So some positive value out wide. which would benefit Puka and Tutu equally. Puka's had 7 targets out of the slot, had 7 targets out wide, had 1 out of a tight end split for Puka, and the Tutu Atwell had 4 out of the slot, 4 out wide. He was better out wide than out of the slot. Puka was better out of the slot than out wide. The price tags on DK are okay. I don't have a ton of faith in the Rams coming through again. Stafford looked great here, but he's now facing arguably one of the best 3 defenses in the league. I think that if you're banking on Stafford, if you're just chasing the 1 week high, I think there can be good weeks moving forward. But the Niners get so much pressure overall. 46% pressure rate by the Niners in week 1. So basically getting pressure on half the plays. When Matthew Stafford was pressured this week, he did drop to his lowest number EPA wise, 0.14 EPA per drop back when he was actually pressured. So I think this is going to be bad for the Rams. So if you were so excited to bid out everybody on Puka and Tutu, and if you don't have anybody else at receiver, I could see still playing them. But I would not chase. I don't think I would chase here. I don't expect them to get results against the Niners. That would be really hard. If they get results against the Niners, the Rams are fucking legit. You should be putting every egg in their basket moving forward. If they do what I think they're going to do against the Niners, then they're fine against bad teams, and they're probably going to have a lot of trouble against good teams. The Commanders. The good old-fashioned Commanders. Also, I didn't even pull up the Rams. My apologies. Where are you at, Commanders? Let me take a sip of water here. Stone Cold Steve Austin on his podcast used to say, like, swig of water for the working man. And I don't know that this is for the working man, but swig of water all the same. 17.3 implied points for the Commanders going against Denver. What did Denver do? Denver really bad at defending the pass. 0.26 EPA per drop back, 0.3 EPA per pass. Was also really bad when they got pressure. They got pressure on 35% of their plays, gave up a 1.1 EPA on those plays. So basically giving up 1 extra point, 1 expected point added every time they got pressure. So it's going to, obviously regress back the other way. That looks really bad. But they didn't get pressure. They had a 0.3 EPA. So they're actually worse not getting pressure than they were getting pressure, which doesn't make sense. Either way, though, really bad everywhere. 0.3 EPA per target allowed out wide, 0.6 EPA per target allowed out of the slot, 0.9 EPA per target allowed to tight ends. To running backs, they defended that pretty well. So negative 0.9 EPA there. I think this is a Washington bounce back spot. The pace of play, maybe not great. Obviously, the total not great, 17.3 implied points. But Howell did have 39 dropbacks against the Cardinals. Maybe the Cardinals D is pretty good and Howell's just mediocre, but now they're facing a team that's actually soft. I don't hate this one at all. Broncos also were pretty bad against play action, gave a 0.3 EPA per play on play action, but Howell was egregious when they played play action. Actually, I think it must have had a turnover on that one. Negative 1.5 EPA per play action play for Sam Howell. I think this is a get well spot for the Commanders. I would be happy to target McLaurin again, though the volume for him being low kind of worries me. I'm hoping that was sort of a Cardinal schematic thing, but only 4 targets in that first game for McLaurin. Did see 6 for Dotson. They were pretty bad. Though Dotson did get 4 out of the slot. And again, the Broncos so far are looking pretty bad out of the slot. I think it's a Dotson bounce back spot, if nothing else. And McLaurin, we'll see the toe, how much it's hurting him. I'm not sure. But I think this is a nice spot for Sam Howell to show something. And if Sam Howell doesn't show something, then he's worse than Jimmy Garoppolo. It's not always 1-to-1 like this, but if Jimmy Garoppolo looks great in a game playing a team and you look bad in a game playing that team, you need to then be filed away accordingly. And I think if Sam Howell doesn't come through here, I think he is going to be in trouble this year. And I think it could be Brissett time sooner than not. Honestly, the Commanders, they won last week, but I think in the future, they might blow some games that they should win. Denver, 21 implied points for 20.8 implied points on their end. Washington's defense shut down the Cardinals, but it was the Cardinals. Negative 0.3 EPA per drop back, negative 0.4 EPA per pass, negative 0.4 EPA per rush, negative 1 EPA flat on QB rushes. And they also defended the red zone well. Weakest spot, it looks like, was running back targets. Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams were targeted very heavily. Javonte had 6 targets out of the running back position. Samaje had 4. So those guys could eat a little bit in this game just based off the pure matchup stuff. In terms of usage, it wasn't great usage for anybody here. Cortland Sutton had no targets out wide, which is what Cortland Sutton does. All 5 of his targets came out of the slot. Marvin Mims had his 2 terrible targets playing out wide, very low ADOT. This Broncos defense did not show us much good in week 1 besides the running back usage. And I think for this week as well, I think it's just running back usage again. I don't think there's anything here you really want besides the running backs. Not even enough volume. Like, I guess, and Judy being back too. Like, is Judy going to somehow chop this volume worse? This is a really piss poor start for a Broncos offense that I thought had some potential to at least get back to normal. I don't love the way this looks. Jets, egregious 15-point implied total. Let's pull them up here. Eventually I'll pull up both teams when I'm talking through a matchup. The Jets. So 15 implied points, Zach Wilson. Did Zach Wilson show us anything in that game? Negative 0.3 EPA per pass, negative 0.2 EPA per dropback for Zach Wilson. Did have a 1.1 EPA per rush. So if Zach Wilson just keeps running, ran 4 times in that game, maybe he can be Justin Fields if he just keeps trying. But Dallas obliterated everything for the Giants. They are the best team in the league in EPA per dropback, negative 0.6. Best team in the league right now in EPA per pass, negative 0.8. Best team in red zone rushing, negative 1.1. Best team in red zone passing in terms of stopping that, negative 1.9. This is a really, really bad spot for Zach Wilson to get well, to show that he deserves to be the starter. This could be the kind of start that leads to Zach Wilson, that they're bringing in another QB after just saying Zach Wilson is our QB, all of that. Think this is really going to be a tough one for old Zach Wilson here. What do I think about Godwin this week? Not much. Did we do Tampa already? Hold on. I don't know why I take one person's questions when I'm trying to keep a flow, but I care. Tampa, we talked about. I think the stack looks pretty good. The worst slot, though, to attack Chicago so far looks like it is the slot. That was the one thing they did and got a negative EPA on. So not feeling great about Godwin. He can get it done with his targets out wide, but I would rather have Evans. Yeah, I think it's much more of an Evans spot to me than a Godwin spot. All right, where were we? I catered to the people too much, and I lost my spot. Let's go to the Dallas side again. Jets, Breece Hall, maybe, but I think it's going to be tough. With Zach Wilson out there, and when you go against good defenses, they're going to put 8 men in the box against Breece, and they're going to make Zach Wilson beat him. And if Zach Wilson can't beat him, which he probably cannot, it's going to go really poorly. So this is something to keep in mind there. I don't think this is a great spot for them. Dallas, 24.5 implied points on their end. The Jets did not look as great as they did last year. Last year, they shut down every deep pass in this game that they had on Monday night. Gave up one, basically a 0 EPA, gave up an average performance there. They were also really bad defending QB rushes, but it doesn't seem like that's a big part of the Dallas playbook yet. Dak ran only once in that first game against the Giants. I did have a red zone rush, though, so maybe that'll give him a chance to punch one in on the ground for himself. Cowboys-wise, though, not great volume for anybody. Really just everybody did good with what they got. It was very efficient touches. 1 target out wide for CeeDee Lamb, 2 targets in the slot, 1 target out of tight end for him. Brandon Cooks had 1 target out wide, 3 targets out of the slot. Gallup had 2 targets out wide, did nothing with them. Ferguson had 5 out of the tight end position. I guess Ferguson looks the best on paper. It does seem like the Jets gave up a 0.6 EPA to tight ends overall. Ferguson had 5 targets. He wasn't great with them. Not a pretty game here. I guess people would probably want to target Tony Pollard. The Jets defense was about average against the run with that negative 0.1 EPA. Only got an 18% stuffed run rate. Did to get a 23% tackle for loss rate. This might just be like an ugly Cowboys win. The Cowboys D is going to really inhibit Zach Wilson. And I don't think Dallas wants to push on the offensive end when they don't have to. Like, they had a good game against the Giants just because they basically rolled over and gave them their bellies. I don't think the Jets D is going to give them their bellies quite as much. So I think that Dallas would be kind of in a void for me this week. I just don't see how Zach Wilson gets enough going to push Dallas, actually make these guys have good days. And you just need them to be so efficient if it is another game where they just boat race a New York team. And I don't think that's going to be the case. Miami and New England. So I don't have the player stats in this one yet because there isn't a slate yet available for DraftKings. Just quickly, New England's weakest spot, it looks like, was playing out of the slot. Tyreek, we know, is going to be able to move around all across the field. But I do think this is a game where, I don't know, 24.5 implied points for Miami. I'll pull them up here. I'm going to just breeze through these, though, because I don't have all the player stuff aligned yet. For Tyreek, he's going to be in play against any matchup. It's just Like, you put that on tape, you put 15 targets for Tyreek on tape. What do you think Bill Belichick and co are going to do? Like, they're going to aggressively come after them and try to make it hard on them. So I think this is a regression spot for Miami. They do have, again, 24.5 implied points. New England on their side is 22. I think you'd expect better production from New England side, just knowing the volume they're going to put out there. Miami was really bad defending the rush in their first game here. 0.3 EPA allowed per rush, 0.3 EPA allowed per QB rush. Should benefit Ramondre and Zeke equally. Ramondre and Zeke's roles were pretty much, I wouldn't say a 50-50 split, but not far off from that. So ugly one here. It's Sunday Night Football. So it's a different slate, honestly. Let's not do Sunday. Let's not do Sunday and Monday. We'll go game by game for the main slate. That's how we'll close this out. Gibbs or Brees rest of the season. That's a tough one. I would go Brees because of the talent and how good he is, but the Wilson part of it makes everything he's going to do a lot harder. That said, I think he can do it. He produced in some hard spots overall. But I don't know, man. I think I would go Gibbs in that one, but the workload for Gibbs stands to be a lot lower than Brees for large chunks of the year. Anything else? I'll see if there's anything interesting in the Monday night games. A doubleheader on Monday night as well. Cleveland-Pittsburgh is the first game. 21 implied points for Cleveland, 18.5 for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's defense got killed, so maybe Cleveland can get some production going. Obviously, the Niners, though, are the ones that killed Pittsburgh, so your mileage may vary on that one. Pittsburgh going against Cleveland's D. Cleveland's D actually looked pretty good, though the Bengals, again, brought nothing to that one. But Cleveland, one of the better teams in EPA per dropback, EPA per pass. So might be another tough spot for Kenny Pickett. It's a 1 week sample size. Obviously, that's not the biggest, but it does feel like potentially there's some bad stuff coming. And a New Orleans-Carolina matchup, 21.3 implied points for New Orleans. Carolina was really bad in the red zone, pretty competent everywhere else. The place that got killed was playing out of the slot, so could be maybe some production for, I guess, really Michael Thomas and Olave and Rashid Shaheed. All those guys ran out of the slot. So 0.7 EPA per target allowed of the slot. Wouldn't be crazy to see an outlier day for all the pass catchers from New Orleans, or, obviously not all of them at once, but one of them I think is going to go off in this spot. New Orleans defense was solid everywhere. No negatives, or, really all negatives defensively. No negatives for how they performed. Negative 0.3 EPA per dropback, negative 0.4 per pass. They're basically league average against the rush, 0 EPA. So they were just allowing teams to do what they're supposed to do in every run play. So maybe a better day for Miles Sanders. So the slot matchup for New Orleans looks good. Miles Sanders looks good on the Carolina side. Pickett season with Deontay Hammy or Pickett just ass? I think it's going to be a tough run for this early part of things. It depends, though. Like, it all comes down to what for week one. Like, was Cincinnati that bad, or was Cleveland's D that good? I kind of tend to think it's the Cincinnati just having a really bad start. T. Higgins having 8 targets and doing nothing with them. That just doesn't happen that often. So I think that Cleveland maybe got lucky there. But we'll see. Like, this is like week 2 is kind of the litmus test week where we saw some stuff in week 1. All the data I talk about here, some of them could just be a bad week 1. Some of that could just be a team that rolls in the week 1 and isn't ready for what they're facing. It's all going to get worse from there, or all get better from there. Week 2, though, is a litmus test, because if these things then strengthen, if they get more pronounced heading into week 3, then we know, like, okay, Cincinnati's played 2 games and they didn't produce in either of them. Is it the defenses they're playing, or is it Cincinnati? I think you can kind of discern that stuff a little bit better. How much FAB are you spending to take a chance on Penny? I wouldn't go crazy on it. I think Swift gets the first crack. $15 out of 100. I wouldn't go nuts on that one, personally. Buying in on the Carolina defense or no? I wouldn't say buying in. It does feel like they have some weaknesses. They were pretty good last year, but they did change defensive coordinators, so I don't know how much that's going to matter overall. Weakness in the red zone always spooks me, because if you're bad in the red zone, like teams like New England, even when they have bad defense, they always tighten up in the red zone because they're well-coached defenses. When teams are bad in the red zone, I tend to think that it's going to get worse for them everywhere else. So Carolina was really bad in the red zone to start out, but obviously that was against kind of a gimmicky Atlanta offense, so we'll see. Pig got slammed into the ground pretty early that game. He may have just been concussed. I think they would have pulled them if they saw that. I think it's how that goes these days. Either way, though, that's it. These are our matchups. Let's call it here. Tomorrow, we'll be back to showdown mode. We'll keep it a little bit quicker, closer to under 20 minutes. But of course, lineups 3 ways. We're going to do them hand-built. We're going to do them with an optimizer. We're going to do them with simulations. We're going to make that all happen tomorrow for showdown. And then Friday, once again, I'm going to run the fantasy football gauntlet. We'll do all those lineup builds. We'll also do a battle royale. We'll do pick'ems. We'll check out the prop markets. That is going to be your splash play menu. course, shout out to the chat as well. Shout out to the Squirt Squad. Thank you for the stream. I appreciate it, fucking Alpha. Appreciate all you guys here. Of course, subscribe down below. Of course, check out our loving sponsor, Probably, as well. Go check it out for free right now at probably.com. We'll be putting up a paywall on there soon, so please go give it a shot while it's free. Check it out. Of course, make some more plus EV bets. Lose less money. That is the goal of Probably. Check it out. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at SplashPlayPod, and check out the rankings video from yesterday. If you've got a free 2.5 hours, watch me rank every player one by one lovingly. I think we did a good job. But shout out to all you guys for hanging out here as always. Shout out to Squirt Squad. See you guys tomorrow. Enjoy your days. And of course, good luck. Bye.